What is going on, YouTube? Lamont at Large, fascinating graveyard. Today I am at the Chestnut Hill Cemetery here in Exeter, Rhode Island, and I'm going to visit the grave of America's last known vampire, Mercy Brown. Salem witch trials, anybody? If anybody has read up on any form of history, the Salem witch trials occurred in the better part of the mid to late 1600s. Imagine being a woman, you're minding your own business, you're sitting at home, and a mob of people with pitchforks and torches drag you out of your house, accuse you of being a witch, tie you up, and burn you at the stake alive, because that's supposedly how you kill a witch. If you just kill a witch by beating her with a object, she's going to come back and hurt you. So after the witch hysteria died down, let's fast forward about 200 years later. So we're talking about the mid to late 1800s in the New England states. You had a disease that was ravaging the area called consumption. Consumption today is known as tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is an airborne bacterial disease that normally it affects the lungs. It could also go to your kidneys, it can go to your spine, and yes, it can go to your brain. Tuberculosis is still a very serious disease. 200,000 Americans every year come down with the dreaded disease. And let me tell you, even though we have modern medicine now to where we can ultimately cure and get rid of the tuberculosis, it is still a very long, arduous process of curing it. You have to take several different medications every day, sometimes for up to 9 months. I've known somebody with tuberculosis, and they said it was a living hell to deal with. And tuberculosis, oftentimes, if you do have inactive TB, it is very dangerous for babies, young children, older adults, and people with a compromised immune system to get it. Okay, so let's continue along with the story. So you're in the mid-late 1800s in New England, and consumption is on the rise. People are dying. Doctors at the time, like many diseases that people have died from during those times, did not understand how the disease was got, how you got it. All they knew it was that it was pretty much you were going to die of the disease, because they had no reason, they had no know-how on curing it. So we're in the town of, like I said, Exeter, Rhode Island, and you had a family by the name of Brown. You had George Brown, his wife, Mary Brown, and they had 3 kids, Mary Olive Brown, Mercy Brown, and of course, Edwin Brown. Sadly, Mother Mary died from consumption in 1883. Sadly, 6 months later, her daughter, Mary Olive Brown, would come down with consumption and die from the disease as well. Now, back in those days, you had city folk and you had, rural, small town farmer folk. And people dreaded the word of consumption. You had some people in the outlying rural communities so desperate to find cures for this disease, because, like I said, modern doctors didn't even know what to do. Oftentimes, they would go back to almost the primitive days of supernatural concoctions and brews, all this and that. Also, the superstitious element would often rear its ugly head in that form and fashion. You had people saying like, oh, it was caused by vampires. Now, Normal thinking people back in those days did not buy that hysteria. They didn't believe in vampires, but a lot of people did. So it was often, I guess you would say, an old wives' tale to believe in such superstitious things such as vampires, things that don't honestly exist, even though, people love to read old stories about the possible existence of vampires and werewolves and what have you. So back in those days, the people that believed that consumption was caused by vampires, well, there is only a couple things that you can do. One of them being that if you had died of consumption, for instance, and your family was being affected with the disease, the thinking is when you were sleeping, the dead family member would come from the grave, come to your house, and while you were sleeping would give you that dreaded disease, and then you would slowly and surely die of it as well. So the only cure to stop a vampire back in those days was to exhume the body, do one of a couple things. You remove the heart or the kidney or liver or both or all of them, all the organs, and then you would burn them. Or some would just simply turn the body over on its stomach, or the unpopular, but this one has definitely got to work, decapitation. Just cut the head off of the body and all is clear. But of course, that wasn't the cause of the consumption, and the family members that were afflicted with the disease would still die. So you had Mary, the mother, died of consumption. You had her daughter, Mary Olive. And in January of 1892, George's second daughter, Mercy Brown, died of the disease after coming down with it. The last child that George Brown had was Edwin, and he had consumption as well. They tried many things to cure him. He even took an 18-month trip out to Colorado to drink from the streams and rivers in Colorado. And of course, it wasn't working. And he came all the way back here to Rhode Island because he missed his home, he missed his friends, and he missed his dad. So Edwin is sick. George, this is his last child. And he doesn't know what to do. So he says, okay, maybe vampires do exist. So his friends, they told him, they said, listen, if you want to save your son, we believe that possibly either your wife or your daughter, either of your daughters who are now all dead, they could be a vampire. Okay, this guy's desperate. Maybe he doesn't really believe in this nonsense, but hey, your last kid? Okay, hey, all bets are off. Let's do this. So they come to this cemetery and they exhume the body first of his wife and the daughter, Mary Olive. Now, it's been years since they've been dead, and now they're nothing but skeletons. It's just skeletal bones. So obviously, they are not the vampire. So here's where the story gets a little bit murky. So they go to where Mercy is buried. Now, the historical documents can't say for sure whether she was in the ground buried or she was in a burial vault. But of course, a burial vault is what they would put you in back in the old days. If you died, let's say in January, like how Mercy died, the ground is so hard, they can't dig into it because they just don't have the modern tools like we have now with, tractors or what have you. So they would put you in the vault and then wait until spring came and the ground thawed, and then they would get you out, and then they would give you a proper burial. So they get her body, and by this time she had only been dead a few months. And when they got to her, they noticed how intact she was. The rate of decomposition had barely affected her. Well, of course, it's very cold now. So they cut open her body and removed her heart. And they noticed that her heart was still fleshy and it was still filled with blood. Aha! Hey, George, obviously your daughter is a vampire and she's affecting your son, so we must do something about it. I'm sure George is like, okay, you know, this works for me. He doesn't know what to do. So what they do is they remove her kidney, they remove her heart, they might have also removed her liver too, and they burned it. They take the ashes from her heart and her organs and mix it with water and create some form of a quote-unquote tonic. And they give it to Edwin to drink. Hey, here you go, Edwin. This is gonna cure you, right? By the way, that building in front of you right there, that is the burial vault. That is the vault where I believe she probably was at the time when they got to her body. They don't use it anymore, but that would be it. Edwin drinks the concoction. Unfortunately, however, like I said, consumption, tuberculosis, a real disease. And about a few months later, he lost his life from that disease. The vampire hysteria, you know, if you want to read it in books, it's a rather interesting bunch of stories about how different people and how they reacted differently to this, you know, crazy hysteria that occurred back in those days. Anyway, so now I am approaching the graves of the Brown family. If you ever come to the cemetery, when you come in, that's the only entrance in here. When you drive down this road, you're gonna see this tree right here, and it'll be to your left, your immediate left. And this is the grave of the mother. This is Mary Brown, and she died December, looks like 8th, 1883. And then this is her daughter, Mary Olive Brown, who died 6 months after her mother. And this would be the supposed vampire, of course, a nonsense story. This is Mercy Brown. She died at the age of 19. And of course, you know, her story is pretty popular. You have people coming to put flowers and trinkets and what have you. And of course, you have the last member to die of that disease, and this is Edwin Brown. We should all be very, very fortunate that we were born in a time where such diseases now are very treatable. This is the father, George Brown. He lived a long life. He was 79 or 80 years old when he died. Can you imagine? Can you imagine you bury your wife and all of your children, and then you live another 30 some odd years? That grave right there to the right of Edwin is Hortense Brown. I'm not sure if he was a brother of George or not. I did not read online that he had a fourth kid, and he lived to be a ripe age. He was born 1855, died 1931, so that would not be his child. A very odd, interesting story, and an unfortunate story, but still a part of American history. Okay, guys, Lamont at Large. I hope you enjoyed this video. I am sorry if I rambled on and on. Sometimes I just can't stop, you know? Can't stop this rolling stone. But rest in peace to the Brown family. And it's just a very, very sad state of affairs back in those days where we had diseases that were incurable. So God rest all their souls. All right, I'm Lamont at Large. Fascinating graveyard. I'll catch up with you on the next vlog. Next time you're in Exeter, Rhode Island, stop on by and visit the Brown family grave. Catch up with you later. Peace out.